Okay, so this is the story Radiant Child. It's the story of young artist Jean Michel Basquiat, which we will be talking about in class. I'm going to share this book in class, but I wanted to share it in a video in case you can't really see it when I'm reading it to you guys. So, this author, Javaka Steptoe, did win the Caldecott Medal and also the Coretta Scott King Award for this book. If you look, this is the cover and the back book cover. If you look, what I love about it as a person who also teaches children's literature is what's on that book cover wrap is what's on the cover and back, except for the title, right? But also look at the end papers. It has a lot of his symbols that we'll learn about that he uses in his art, that has a lot of symbolic meaning, that we'll learn. This is I believe, a self-portrait anyway, so he signs it Samo. And I was watching a documentary last night. You might not share this with kids, but Samo was same old shit. So that's how he signed it. And I can't remember about the C, but maybe it'll be in there. Or maybe that's copyright, right? So, anyway, here we go. Radiant Child. One thing I like to do when I'm sharing children's books with children is also be sharing about the author. And the author wrote about this book. Like Jean Michel Basquiat, I used bits of New York City to create the artwork for this book. I painted on richly textured pieces of wood, found wood harvested from discarded Brooklyn Museum exhibit materials. The dumpsters of Brooklyn brownstones in the streets of Greenwich Village and the Lower East Side. In all those areas. I didn't read the commas correctly. In this way, I invite my readers to create using the materials, people, and places in their environment. While they will not find reproductions of actual Basquiat artwork in Radiant Child, they will find my original pieces that were inspired by him and my interpretations of his paintings and designs. So, I'm assuming that's Javaka Steptoe. Alright, so this is like a bibliography. The artwork in here is beautiful. Somewhere in Brooklyn, between hearts that thump, double Dutch, and hopscotch, and Sally mouths that slurp sweet ice, a little boy dreams of being a famous artist. In his house, you can tell a serious artist dwells as he sits at a table with pencils scattered everywhere. Jean Michel draws from morning until night with a serious face amid a storm of papers. He refuses to sleep until he has created a masterpiece. At night, images enchant Jean Michel's mind, and he wakes from his dreams to add one more line. His drawings are not neat or clean, nor does he color inside the lines. They are sloppy, ugly, and sometimes weird, but somehow still beautiful. The other thing I like to teach kids when I'm using a children's book like this with young children is the process that this artist used. And it's not that we're trying to copy his work, but immerse ourselves in his process. His art comes from his mother Matilda, and it's Matilde. I think it's Matilde, but I want to add the A onto it. A Puerto Rican woman who designs and sews, cooks and cleans, and makes the house look like a stylish magazine. But most important, she lies on the floor and draws with Jean Michel on his father's old work papers. So they were using found materials in the house, too, because blank paper was not what he was drawing on. From her, he learns that art is not only in the poetry books she reads to him or in the theaters and museums they visit. Art is the street games of little children. In our style and the words that we speak, it is how the messy patchwork of the city creates new meaning of ordinary things. While visiting the museum, they look at his favorite works of art, reading the story behind each artist, reading the story behind each work. This is how Jean Michel learns what it means to be a famous artist. I don't know my art that well, but I want to say something like, yeah, I don't know. I was going to say Pablo, but I think it's probably not. Back at home, he creates art on the floor as his father Gerard plays jazz records. Mama Matilda cooks arroz con pollo. Also, I'm sorry, I'm butchering those words. And calls Jean Michel mi amor. The energy and life of the city can be felt in each line of the drawings. So he's really surrounded by a life of art, musicians, poetry, words, and also the processes of creating physical art with different media. As time goes by, Jean Michel learns that art has a healing power. After a car accident, he is scared and confused, and Mathilde gives him a book to calm his fears. It's filled with pictures of bones, skulls, and other body parts. It's Grey's Anatomy. And Jean Michel draws from it until he knows it all by heart. He is no longer afraid, which kind of explains why some of his art pieces have these body parts, skulls, skeletons, kinds of things. Back at home, Jean Michel's body heals, but his heart breaks. His mother's mind is not well, and the family breaks. She no longer lies on the floor and draws with Jean Michel, but sits by the window singing only to birds. Jean Michel is confused and filled with a terrible blues when Mathilde can no longer live at home. I love that this book talks about the healing power of art and the process of art, creating it. He tries drawing the terrible out of his blues. But things are not the same. As Jean Michel grows older, he visits his mother when he can, always bringing his artwork to show, telling her that one day it will be in a museum when I am a famous artist. I also love here how the mom is wearing this gorgeous floral dress on the green upholstered chair. A teenager now, Jean Michel decides, Papa, I will be very, very famous one day. With a sly look, a twinkle in his eyes, Jean Michel leaves Brooklyn for the Lower East Side, New York City, a concrete jungle where only the tough survive. Now, if you watch a documentary, you will know that the father kicked him out. And I suppose developmentally they decided that wasn't something that the children needed to deal with at this time. During the day, dressed in a green jumpsuit splattered with paint, Jean Michel stays with friends, sleeping on couches and floors, leaving a barrage of collages and poem-filled papers everywhere he goes. One thing I was reading said that he reclaims poetry and then puts his drawings or creations around it, which I thought was interesting. Some of the things, I'm trying to see if I can read it. Same Old Saves. Something for the Social Avant-Garde. Same Old Lives. Amado. Not Cause Cancer. Same old. At night, Jean Michel spray paints the walls downtown with poems and drawings that catch the eye of artists, gallery goers, and passers-by. Under his art, he signs the name Samo instead of Jean Michel. Everyone wants to know who Samo is. Samo moves from street corners to art galleries with powerful color composition and line, collaging and painting on anything he can find. His art is still not neat or clean and definitely not inside the lines, but somehow still beautiful. I also like that this might introduce children to the idea that artwork is unique and represents the person, but it doesn't have to look like in a traditional way beautiful. With his magical charm, Jean Michel draws a crowd, but when it's time to work, he prefers to be alone with the radio and TV on full blast. And they did this thing I watched yesterday. He had a studio in a basement, and he really did stay down there by himself and create. And he kept adding to pieces. It wasn't like one and done. As they were around, he'd walk by it, or someone would say something, and he'd go and add to it. Jean Michel, an artist among artists, never doubts one line, creating from a soundtrack that is all his own. So he does refer sometimes, I think, to music that his father and mother might have exposed him to. Charlie Parker, Billie Holiday, and then he has some Spanish words here. Abuelita, 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 which is, I think, grandmother, but maybe it's mother. Famous Negro athletes, Salt, Snake. It's interesting, like, to see the different things he chooses to put. People describe him as a radiant, wild, a genius child, but in his heart, he is a king. So he draws crowns for himself and others he admires. So that's one of his simple symbols, is this crown. Find it on a lot of his pieces. And there was a lot of things, at least in what I was looking at last night, about the boxing. And this image that the illustrator created has different things, I think, about him. So Nobody Loves a Genius Child, art, different newspaper articles maybe that there actually were of him. I'm not sure. A grown man now, the art world in his hands, Jean Michel still visits his mother when he can. And at his most important shows, above all the critic fans and artists he admires, the place of honor is his mother's, a queen on a throne. He is now a famous artist. And that was the end. Now, it tells you some interesting things. This book, I think, is great for young children, and as they revisit it each time, they can learn different things. So it says, Jean Michel Basquiat was born on December 22nd, 1960, and grew up in Brooklyn, New York. His father was from Haiti, and his mother's family was from Puerto Rico, living in a trilingual household. Jean Michel spoke French, Spanish, and English. While his father had some artistic skill, I think he was an accountant, though. It was Jean Michel's mother, Mathilde, who drew with him and took him to museums. He particularly liked seeing the painting called Guernica by Pablo Picasso. Maybe I was right. In the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. It now hangs in Museo Reina Sofia in Madrid, Spain. Some people think that Guernica, I wish I could say that right, shows the suffering of people and animals when warplanes bombed the village of Guernica, Spain, during the Spanish Civil War. It is one of the most famous anti-war paintings ever created, a form of activism through art, and a piece that shows the power of an artist's voice, which may have inspired young Jean Michel. When he was about 7 years old, Jean Michel was hit by a car and badly injured. His mother gave him a copy of Gray's Anatomy, perhaps to help him understand what was happening inside his body as he recovered. The medical textbook became an important influence in his later work. That same year, Matilda began suffering from mental health issues and eventually left the family home, a difficult loss of an important daily role model for Jean Michel. As he grew older, though, he visited his mother and showed her his artwork, which helped maintain their relationship. At age 17, Jean Michel moved away from home. He sold postcards and t-shirts of his own designs to support himself, and he used whatever he could find as a canvas. His first recognized work was a graffiti series created with his friend Al Diaz starting in 1977, tagged with the name Samo. The traditional art world was looking for something new, modern, and connected to street culture, and Basquiat arrived at the perfect time. His first public exhibition was in the Times Square show in 1980, and his first solo show was in Italy in 1981, the year he sold his first painting, which would be followed by many others. He also met and became friends with other famous artists of the time period like Andy Warhol and Keith Haring. Basquiat lived on an exhilarating life, but underneath the excitement of his success, he struggled with a drug addiction until his death on August 12, 1988, when he was only 27 years old. His paintings now sell for millions of dollars and are collected and displayed in museums all over the world, such as the Whitney Museum of American Art and the Brooklyn Museum. Basquiat was known for his charisma, energy, and bold, captivating art. His work was often political and expressive, with a strong point of view and message, which is why letters, words, and phrases sometimes appear in his pieces. He addressed topics such as life struggles of everyday people and their fight against capitalism, colonialism, and those with power. His work also spoke from black culture, including influences from African and African diaspora art, religion, history, and folklore, improvisational jazz, bebop, hip-hop, sports, and the melting pot culture of New York City. Like many artists, Basquiat used motifs, recurring subjects or ideas, in his paintings. See if you can find examples of these motifs throughout the book. So then they have the crown and eyes and cars. So the crown for Basquiat, crowns represented many things such as power or strength, and he often gave crowns to others in his artwork as a sign of respect. The eyes often represented remembering, seeing, or understanding the past or present. And cars, trucks, and airplanes often symbolized Basquiat's childhood and the car accident that badly injured him. And then there's a note from the author, it's not how I thought they said his name, Javaka Steptoe. I first became familiar with Jean-Michel Basquiat's artwork when I was in high school and even more so in college. Like Basquiat, I spent time with a diverse mix of people in New York City's Greenwich Village. It was there that I saw his graffiti and posters and read about him in the New York Times article, New Art, New Money. And I even went to one of his art shows. Basquiat's success seemed to me to begin an era of inclusion and diversity in the fine arts, where there had been little to none. This meant, as a young African-American artist coming up, that my chances of having my voice heard and achieving mainstream success were majorly expanded. But it wasn't until much later at an exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum in 2005 that I truly understood how much his work meant to me. It made me realize that I wanted to help young people connect with his art the way that I had. I also wanted young readers and the adults in their lives to be able to use Basquiat's story as a catalyst for conversation and healing. As someone whose mother suffers from mental illness, I believe the story touches on an important topic, as diagnosable mental disorders affect about 1 in 4 adults in the United States every year. Most important, I hope that young readers will see that Basquiat's artwork is more than just bright colors or intriguing composition or text. It's thoughtful, powerful, and interesting like all artwork. It is not something that is good or bad. His art was his voice, which used to speak about complex social issues and politics that are still relevant today. Instead of reproducing or including copies of real Basquiat paintings in this book, I chose to create my own interpretations of certain pieces and motifs. By painting them on textured pieces of wood, blending his style with mine, my goal was to show how his artwork has inspired me and to give young readers a sense of his artistic style. I hope they will want to learn more about him and will look for examples of his actual work online and in museums. Jean-Michel Basquiat went after his dream of becoming a famous artist with all his heart. There is no doubt he made a mark on the world and encouraged others to do the same, and that mark matters especially to artists and storytellers like me. So I actually think this is fascinating too, because we have his take on it, some of these look like self-portraits, right? And given the assignment we did last week, I think this is an interesting thing to look at. I have another book where they use Jean-Michel's artwork to illustrate Maya Angelou's poems, and I haven't been able to find it in the house. I'm going to keep looking, and then I'm going to look in my office, and I hope to get to share that because, like Javaka Steptoe said, this is his take on Jean-Michel Basquiat. But when we are introducing Jean-Michel Basquiat, obviously we want to have images of his actual work to share.